about the commission.
Yeah, Dakis Joannou is a mega super art collector, and he has this project that's called the DESTE Fashion Collection, where basically what he's been doing for the last 6 years is inviting artists from different disciplines to choose 5 pieces of fashion or something resembling fashion, and then incorporating this in a piece of art. So far it's been photographer, painter, poet, and it's the first time that he collaborated with a filmmaker. So, I really wanted to find stuff that was not haute couture per se. I wasn't interested in making a fashion film. So, together with my assistants and researchers, we looked online to find people, fashion designers, who were working with the idea of clothes as sculpture. And that's how we kept going from the one to the other. And there was one very important discovery, which was Ying Gao. She's a Chinese-Canadian designer who's based in Montreal, and she works with with sensors and with interactive smart clothes. So she donated to the collection this dress that reacts to light. It has sensors, and every time there is a light beam that's falling on its beautiful kind of orchid-like shape, it starts moving. So then a combination of these clothes, Sandra Backlund, she donated this amazing coat that's made out of human hair that Ariane was wearing. Anyway, it was fun. It was really like visiting a completely different universe that I had nothing to do with. And then figuring out what to do with this. It's almost like someone giving you 5 words and asking you to write a story. So this was my, limited dictionary that then I had to transform and invest into a story. And then somehow, completely intuitively, I connected these 5 pieces with Alexandra Walishevska's work. She's a tremendous Polish painter. And so I visited her in Warsaw, and we discussed the film, and we discussed which of her paintings perhaps we could use in order to create a story. And then, somehow naturally, step by step, without actually knowing what we're going to do in the end, the island of Hydra came into play. The idea of a bunch of women entrapped somewhere and actually not really being able to live or stay alive or die. Then those girls, those amazing talented actresses came on board, and somehow, it was like almost like a game. And we shot it in 3 days, and it's a capsule. It's a capsule of something, of a bunch of different people who came together.
I like that you use the word trapped, because that's an element of the capsule, maybe the more negative connotation, but something can be trapped in a capsule, or as the case may be, egg, like the images of eggs, or maybe that like womb-like chair structure. And even the house. The house made me think of 18th century English novels where women would be trapped in these kind of castles.
Yeah.
Was that a motif that you were kind of playing with, or a theme?
I was interested in exploring that. I've never done anything like this, and I'm more and more interested in genre and working with genre. So I guess this is sort of like my attempt to like horror, fantasy, vampire, whatever. And also, I'm interested in the fact that this kind of literature didn't really exist in Greece. We never went through this like Victorian, although we were part of the Ottoman Empire back then, and we were hardly a nation, and we hardly had literature. But that island where the capsule was shot was a very important island for the independence of Greece, because lots of ship owners lived there, and they were the ones who led the revolution against the Ottomans. And there was actually a couple of women, very powerful women who were captains themselves, who led the revolution. So there was this idea of captured women who at the same time are very strong and eternal.
They're also often hiding when they're discovered and welcomed, or they're each individually welcomed, but they're initially hiding or contained within something.
The idea is that they're being born by the house itself. So they are born, their life cycle is 4 days, and then they dissolve the same way they became alive or apparent through that structure, and then they are replaced by similar doubles of them. At a certain point, she tells them that she's their origin. And to tell you the truth, I'm always interested in this idea, like in Attenberg and in the Slow Business of Going, the idea of this sort of like secret society of competition, envy, desire that exists amongst women, especially young women who are coming into their own. So it was interesting to create this capsule, this situation where there is no escape from, and everything is very ritualized. To reenact this, quite cruel relationship between women. Imagine what kind of envy and what kind of curiosity there was amongst these girls, who were like watching each other, trying to become the best, to attract the attention of their master. It's things like power and discipline is something that is interesting to me. And the birth of desire through that, and the tyranny of desire through that.
Even before they compete, though, I find it interesting that there has to be a type of uniform, like both literally, like what they're wearing, but also occupying the same position, and then that leads to inevitably some form of competition. But they're always wearing the same thing. And did you design the dress with the?
Yeah, the black dress with a white collar. There was also there is a film by Kakoyannis, Greek director. His most known film is Zorba the Greek. He has made a couple of masterpieces, and one of them is called The Girl in Black, that was shot in Hydra, the same island, and Ellie Labeti, the main actress, was wearing a similar dress. And Kakoyannis died this year.
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, you know, going back to Hydra to shoot a film with strong female characters, something like 50, 60 years after he shot The Girl in Black, was, you know, some kind of another life cycle in Greek cinema, and my homage to him. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, and I've actually looked into that period of Greek cinema before in school, and it's interesting how kind of the influence of Italian neorealism came in, but it was it was matched with stories that, as you say, they had strong female characters in many of them in that period.
And a huge influence from Greek tragedy.
Yeah.
Which is something that, you know, I'm always inspired by, and I think in all of my work there is some kind of reworking of one of the cycles of Greek tragedy.
And the cycle in this culminates with a kind of ascension to the heaven by the master. But it's also, it's tied up with the goats as well, and it made me think of Slow Business of Going with the end, near the end, where there's the story of when the grandmother is about to pass away, the ritual kind of killing of one of the goats.
A lamb.
Yeah. Oh, lamb, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I grew up basically in this kind of environment. Both my grandparents were farmers, and the idea of living with animals, killing animals to eat, petting animals, you know, sleeping with little sheep, or, you know, it was something that I grew up with, and to me it's very much part of what it is to be human. And it's a big part of Greek culture. And also goats, they are kind of like holy religious animals in our tradition. And to tell you the truth, I just like the idea that these girls have goats as their pets, as their friends. I mean, I have no other way to describe or explain that. You know, there's some things that you just like as images, and it's best not to try to figure out too much what it means, because sometimes it can be scary, and you have to go to a psychoanalyst.
It did make me think of the moment in Attenberg when her father mentions that the Industrial Revolution was skipped over and it was just sheep and farming, and then this moved straight into industry, and the relationship with kind of time in your films and history.
Yeah, I mean, both Attenberg and the Capsule have been shot after the beginning of the Greek Depression. So this sense of entrapment and this kind of like endless cycle of death that never ends, and the inability to actually really transcend your fate, and the mourning of your ancestors and the anger for your ancestors' mistakes, all of that, whether I want it or not. And when I write, I never say, okay, now I'm going to make a film, or I'm going to write a story about the Greek crisis, or how fucked up my people are, or the empowerment of women, or something like that. I don't consider myself a so-called feminist. I am a woman and I make films, so I don't know if I need to sort of like defend or speak about my films as like female films. I kind of have a big of a problem with that.
Well, I was thinking that with talking about time and history, and one moment in Slow Business of Going that I really like is kind of the philosophical question of whether it's the wanderlust is a kind of association with amnesia, or whether, and the other side of the argument was that stasis, like not moving around, creates a kind of amnesia. Because Attenberg also seems like there's a cycle where there's not a movement out of this sphere, and the father does seem the most aware of kind of the past and where things are going, but those who kind of don't pay attention to these things can tend to get trapped up in them.
Yeah, I mean, this has been an ongoing battle, a personal battle of mine, between the almost compulsive desire to keep moving and the necessity of a pause, of, you know, being tied down to a location, to a home, to a family, to a place, a culture, a lover, a husband, a child, you know, all of that stuff. I think this also, I mean, when I made Slowbiz, I was, you know, I was still a student, but already I had been traveling a lot. I was living away from my country, and the whole, you know, the whole way we made the Slowbiz of Going was just picking up and going, you know, and moving, sort of like a little nomadic film family. We were very personally connected. We're a bunch of friends. We're going out with each other. We loved each other. We're discovering cinema together. We're kind of like, yeah, a small nomadic group that was learning life and at the same time learning cinema. And we did that at the same time as going to film school, but in a way this was a much more you know, helpful film education. And that lasted about 4 years, on and off. You know, every time we would get a grant or get some kind of sponsorship from an airline or a hotel, we would just like go to Cuba or, you know, go to Japan or go. And the whole idea behind it was exactly to demonstrate something that's my thesis, that everything is so, this was kind of like the beginning of the realization, and also it was 11 years ago, so it was the beginning of this idea of this sense of like homogenized space, where basically it doesn't really matter where you are. You know, when you leave, when everything is so globalized, it's actually very difficult, you know, to feel the singularity of your life and of your culture and of your language. And then moving to Greece afterwards, and basically going back home and trying to be reconnected with it. It's been very difficult because I went back to Greece at a point where Greece itself as a place could not recognize itself, was falling apart, and I could feel this sense of alienation in my, you know, in my people, in my peers. So this estrangement that was in the Slowbiz of Going, of this woman basically who can never stop, is not allowed to stop, that's her job, which is kind of like a metaphor for what a filmmaker is. It's like compulsive, full-time professional voyeur. So then when going back to Greece, I sort of like, whether I wanted to or not, I put myself back into this place of a native voyeur instead of a foreigner voyeur.
Well, in Attenberg, you have the kind of opposite, where there's a kind of tourism spot that's empty, and especially during the credit sequence, when you're setting up this space, it's all the shots are empty. Even the hospital, more or less is empty, and but it should be, based on the location, something that's filled with people staying, coming, going.
We actually shot it in a sort of like an industrial relic of a town, which is still a company town that belongs to the factory that's nearby, but it's actually a ghost town. It's the end. It's a place where I grew up.
Oh.
Up until I was 6, and then we moved to Athens. But we kept going back there every summer, and my father used to work there, and it's to me it was interesting going back to Greece and having thought of a story between a father and a daughter. I was interested in placing it in a place that was very symbolic of what I thought of Greece. So this kind of like ghost town, empty, almost like a theme park of itself, where these two girls basically are trying to grow up, and the father who built this town is dying, and the girl is basically learning how to be a woman. I didn't really want to stage it into a naturalist environment, realism. That I didn't think that was appropriate for this kind of story.
The use of music in that film and the capsule is interesting to me, because in both instances it seems like the music is almost like instructive. It's something that is a map or something that is teaching the characters that enjoy. So you have Suicide and you have The Horse with No Name.
Yeah, it's like a musical. It's like the use of music in a musical, where the music parts illustrate or complement the story. It's a different use of the structure of a musical. I'm really interested in that, and I always work with found music that is either important to me or I discover it and it becomes an integral part of the narrative.
And in the capsule, it's almost teaching the women to kind of engage with it, or it's used
to dance, to move. Yeah. Well, that was our attempt for entertainment. They learn how to have fun. They learn how to discipline themselves. They learn how to eat. They learn how to dance, how to walk, how to betray each other, how to tell on each other. The basic stuff. How to hate, how to love. And then by the time they learn all these things, they're gone. Which is exactly how life is.
It's visually also maybe that's the irony of that scene. It's a confusing scene as well, because you have the sun coming through the windows, which is creating a lot of lens flares. You have a lot of the frame is out of focus, and it doesn't appear that anyone's playing the piano, but you can hear it.
Yeah.
So as much as they're trying to learn things, it's also difficult to orient yourself as a viewer in that space.
Good.
So there's also a recurring use of slow motion, which I wanted to ask you about in the capsule, and what appealed to you about that technique for the story.
Well, the accompanying piece of Capsule is an installation.
Oh, okay.
So, and it's an installation that we presented in New York, and we wanted to present here in Toronto, but there were some technical problems involved. So, that's like the second life, or the second phase of the capsule. So in that there was, there's 2 channels. It's actually a 3D project, where, through some kind of illusion machine that we built, that is very much like a reference to the early, like vision machines.
Oh yeah.
So through a trick that we created with 3D filters, if you look through a part of the apparatus that we have built, which is a grid, you see the same, you see the action in slow motion, and then when you look at it, or you see different parts of the action. So basically there is this dialogue between time and some kind of like cubist approach to the same scene, where depending on which cell you look through, it's sort of like a honeycomb kind of thing. So depending on which cell you look through, you see a different angle and a different time treatment of the scene. So it creates this like very disorientating and hallucinatory kind of game, sort of like like in a fun house. I don't really like video art installations per se. I like this kind of fun engagement between viewer and the spectacle. So that's what I try to create. So the slow motion is sort of like a relic from the installation, and I don't know, I thought it was interesting to sometimes pause and stretch some moments, like the kiss between the mistress and the student.
It calls to mind kind of the observational qualities that are in, especially Attenberg and the Capsule, where in Attenberg it's associated kind of with Attenborough and the documentation of animals, but in this, it seems like as a viewer you're aware that you're observing almost like a science experiment or something.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great way to put it.
There's an interesting thing that happens in the ordering of the story as well, which is that the scene where they're all walking with the lambs out, it recurs throughout, which makes you aware, when you first see it, you think that it's just another scene in the order of the scenes, but then you realize that it's kind of it's one moment that's been placed throughout. And Attenberg has something similar, which is kind of the walking in unison. When you first see it, it's just a scene, but then it comes throughout. And I'm wondering what the function is of those moments.
In Attenberg, it was the dance animal kind of scenes were placed like a chorus.
Oh, yeah.
In Greek tragedy, you always have the chorus that comes to interrupt and give a pause to all this tragedy, and then a commentary also. So it was, I don't know, it seems that lots of the questions are about the way I structure my films. The Slow Bishop Going was also like an epic of structuring and restructuring and moving from essay to fiction to animation, to diary, to screwball, slapstick, everything. So I don't know, I more and more I tend to choose to be completely unapologetic about it and just say that the masters that have been my mentors and that I've been admiring and I've been desperately trying to copy, steal from, emulate or there are people who have been very daring with structure, with cinema, not only just as a means of representation and as a visual rendering of literature or of music. And I Bresson or Godard, or you spoke about talking to Ernie Gear, for example, Chris Marker. I think it's, you know, if you work in a medium, it's fun to break it apart and put it back together, you know, sort of like you're a little kid in an attic and you just have your puzzle pieces and you constantly destroy, and then the next morning you make something else. And this is part of the joy of working. Part of the joy of working, period. You know, to like build and break apart things over and over again. For the capsule, it was, you know, it was another I like doing things that I know nothing about. You know, I didn't know I was going to make like a quasi-horror fantasy film, and I didn't know that I was actually interested in you know, vampire films. And I was, you know, like I had a quick crash course a couple of weeks before we started shooting, you know, just to see basically what the expression is when someone bites someone's neck, you know, stuff like that. And how is it when, you know, the victim falls and shakes her body, you know, stuff like that. You know, I'm really fascinated by the choreography of bodies. And that's why, for example, I you know, no one could probably suspect this, but I'm completely crazy about action films. The Bourne trilogy, and especially, you know, Greengrass's one, to me is like a masterpiece. So that's something that I'm really interested in making, since I'm, you know, I'm constantly attacking genre in my very idiosyncratic way, but I am considering myself like a genre filmmaker. I really want to work with action.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, like full-on action.
Is there?
Yeah, with American actors, why not? But you know, of course, it will have something to do with some kind of like chase across the world, you know, something where I can incorporate as many places, cities, as I can.
Is there an intersection between like the use of bodies in action and just dance choreography?
Of course, you know, like when you see a Michael Bay movie, I'm always like completely fascinated by the way all those flying, exploding bodies, things, robots, cars, whatever, are choreographed. I think they're, you know, some of those sequences are masterpieces into themselves. You know, my hat off to the guy. I mean, I have no taboo over, you know, what we call avant-garde film or experimental film or Hollywood. Absolutely not. I'm completely against this. And I think that, you know, if I had the budget and if I was working in Hollywood, I would have no problem, you know, working with it, within this kind of genres and this kind of productions. The way that people like, you know, John Ford or Howard Hawks or all these, you know, original auteurs were working within a studio system, and they would just hand them a script Monday morning. Okay, the next month you will be doing a Western, and then you will be doing a musical, and then you will be doing, and they did the best they could, lending their own voice. And to me, there is something really dignified and purely no bullshit artistic about that I really admire. And unfortunately, it's not like this. And somehow, I think we have regressed to a much more conservative understanding and approach to film, which is, you know, full of taboos and sides. You know, which side are you? Like art house cinema or Hollywood or serious European or you know, whatever, meditative Asian or you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Like comedy,
Yeah.
bromances or romance or whatever, you know, and I think that there is a way to like combine all of them in more idiosyncratic ways that are not necessarily obscure or non-commercial.
When you're talking about Michael Bay, it made me think of one thing that action films have is usually a very sophisticated sound design, and your films tend to as well. And I think I remember you saying that you kind of had the sound in the script when you were working on the capsule. I was wondering what that process was.
Yeah, I mean, it was the same with all of the films,
Yeah.
all three of the films. That sound is, to me, is equal to the image. It's as important to the experience. So I always make little notes on the side of the script of what kind of sound design or what kind of sounds we have to capture, record at the same time as the image. And you know, with a capsule, with my two sound designers, with Leandros and with Matt, you know, we processed a lot all the natural sounds that were going on in the island and around the house. So it was, the idea was to create a score, because listening to the capsule, it's like if you just listen and not watch it, not have the image, it feels like a score, which is using processed natural sounds. So it's like all the insects of Hydra during springtime, and the sea, and all the different wind through the different surfaces, the different crevices of the house, and basically the house as an organism. That was the idea, and also the idea of this house as a big hive. So there were lots of bees, and all this was punctured, sort of like in a minimalist score, through the recurrence of the shutters. These very heavy shutters that were opening and closing, which in a way they were kind of like cries of the girls who couldn't get out.
It made me think of like the hull of a ship, or like maybe like the slaves moving the oars or something like that.
Well, that's a good parallel.
I also thought I heard a record player a few times.
Yes, very good.
Was that what it was, or?
Yeah, we actually used all sorts of different hisses and static, electronic static from like very old video cassettes, and record players being stuck in very old records, you know, using old records. Yeah, sort of like evoking all these like natural sounds that would give body to something that, you know, didn't have music per se. You know, how can you dress silence, you know, in a way where basically it's not full-on silence and it's not just room tone, but it's something that has this kind of like cottony feel about it. You know, it's like a bit like plunging into a wool blanket or something. And it's very difficult to recreate that. You know, we had to talk a lot to figure out. I kept saying, I want something that's like wool, something that's like warm and fuzzy, and at the same time it's like the opposite. And they were like, okay, Athina, let's see. And in the end, you know, I happened to watch very old, early video on YouTube, and I noticed the sound of it, you know, this kind of static, and I was like, that's what it is. Okay, bring VHS tapes.
And it took a while to finalize the sound for the film, is that true?
Yeah. You know, we worked for Locarno, and then we took a break because we had another film production during the summer, and then just a few days before I came to Toronto, we did it again. And now with the DCP, fortunately, or actually unfortunately, you know, you can like keep
Yeah.
working on stuff. It doesn't have this kind of finality of a film print, which I really miss actually. I was completely against the idea of showing on DCP, but in the end it's practical and there's no going back. So we might as well give in to the emergence of and the kingdom of the pixels.
And when you were shooting the film, you didn't know who was going to be the winner of the kind of competition that was going on?
No, not really.
Yeah.
That's something that I knew some of the actresses, but the other half I didn't really know very much. So, and I love to work with the personalities of the actors that I work with, and we really develop stuff together. And I normally rehearse a lot. And this time there was absolutely no rehearsal, so I basically sent them the so-called script the day before they came. So they were completely unprepared, and I think that was probably good because there was some kind of innocence and lack of self-consciousness that came into the shoot. And then in the end, just by noticing how each one reacted, and somehow, and the way, when you see people through the lens, you kind of like fully have this very intense connection. Yeah, so Isolda emerged as the one who would want to kill the others and be teacher's pet, basically. She was fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, as a character, she's completely the opposite. Completely the opposite. She's like so tender and so nice and so fun to be around, but she gets in front of the lens and she's completely transformed. She's incredible. It was really amazing to work with all of them, actually, and a few of them are not even actresses. Denise is an extremely talented young Turkish director who lives in Paris, whom I had met in Istanbul a few months before. I was mentoring at the Sundance Labs there. So I met her as a director and I invited her, and she was great. And then Sophia is an architect who designed the installation part.
Oh, okay.
Ariane is from Attenberg. Clémence, an amazing French actress. And then Aurora is a young actress who I met in Greece, and she's half Greek, half Belgian, half Rwandan. And I had seen her in Venice in the Chantal Ackerman film.
Oh, the Joseph Conrad adaptation. Yeah.
Le Captive. So Aurora and I met her on the boat because we're going to, at the same time, to Venice for Alps. So I met her on the boat and we exchanged emails, and then she saw Attenberg and she wrote me a very nice email. And then as I was gathering sort of like the synthesis of the girls, and I had to choose between different, somehow very intuitively, I invited the 7 of them. And I think it was a very successful combination because it was so much fun between them and between all the crew and the cast. I mean, it was crazy. We're shooting whatever 16 hours a day and having them do all these crazy things. And at the same time shooting the green screen for the animation.
Yeah.
No, it was, it was a little experiment. I didn't know it was going to end up being a film. But basically it was a as everything that I'm trying to do is creating a capsule for an experience between everyone. And right now, after all these years, through HAOS Film, our company, it really feels like working with a family and within a family, which has been stationary for the past 5 years, but now we might start moving again.
Do you have a new capsule experiment that you're working on?
Yeah, I have a couple.
Yeah?
So we'll see. There is a film that I want to shoot back in Texas.
Oh, okay.
And then there is a film that I'm writing right now that's going on between Mexico and Cuba.
What genres?
The Texas one is a screwball tragedy.
Okay.
But it's sort of like my idea of a romance film. Very curious about that. The Mexico and Cuba one is sort of like a new idea. That's like a spy thriller. And then there is a science fiction film that actually it's in full development right now. It's called Dunkaron. That is written by my longtime collaborator, editor, partner, Matt Johnson, and myself. And that's, that's sort of like our ambitious project that it's going to take some time to be made.
See, yeah.
But it's kind of like something that we've been wanting to do since we were film students, since we met at film school. And we presented it this year at this script development market in Rotterdam called Cinemart.
Oh, okay.
And it seems that, got lots of interest, and we might be able to, sooner or later do something that's kind of like a bit more ambitious project for HAOS Film.
Are there certain science fiction films that you particularly like that you would aspire to, or?
Yes, I mean, it is as with everything that I'm trying to do, whether it succeeds or fails, I really want it to be my take on and Matt's take on science fiction films. He's a science fiction freak.
Okay.
I mean, he's like a science fiction connoisseur. I come from like a more skewed left side to that, contributing my own things, like combining Greek tragedy. But the idea, Greek tragedy elements to a story that's quite universal, but the basic wish for this film is to be really, really funny. So, Dr. Strangelove is of course a reference, but also, screwball comedies, Hard Hawks, Breaking Up Baby, very basic science fiction films that they're, whether you want it or not, they're reference films like Solaris or Stalker.
Yeah.
But it's a gamble, to make something like this, and creating like little characters. I'm really into our characters right now. That we would ideally like to create, to sort of like build, and then CG, work with a combination between, handmade, sort of like the way Weta works is like a big inspiration for us.
Oh, it sounds exciting.
Yeah, it's dreaming, but why not?
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.